So we were asked, we had some guys on here from the Big Break contest, and it's like a battle of the bands thing. So Dan went and judged it, and we went over there to hang out with him. And I kind of remembered, like back in the day, I used to play a little music. Mark used to be in a band with Dan. So I think we're going to try and put together a one night and one night only cover band. And we are going to do covers of emo songs played country style and country songs played emo style. And we're going to call the band Mood Ranch.
Mood Ranch. I like it.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. Catchy.
It's not too bad.
If you made me laugh, then I'm going to say I like it because that's catchy.
Okay, so let's just get into it because you have a hard out at 4:30, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
So, Joe Harris.
Yes, sir.
Good to have you here.
No, it's great to be here, guys.
Do you want to give a little background on yourself before we get into the book? The book is, can you see that up there? This is School Security, the Risk Assessment Blueprint, Your Tool to a Safer School. What makes you equipped to write a book about this? So basically your background. So it's
a lot of free time.
Yeah.
That's what made me.
Oh, you were non-essential too?
I was non-essential. I had a lot of downtime.
Yeah.
20 years of law enforcement experience. So I'll start with that. As a young guy, I started, my law enforcement career with the Scranton Police Department, and did pretty much everything that you could ask to do. In law enforcement career, SWAT team, sniper team, honor guard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so my last couple of years with since probably when I got onto the SWAT team, we also called it SOG, Special Operation Group, we were introduced to a speaker named Lieutenant Colonel Grossman. And I want to say that was back in like 2003, 2004. Absolutely phenomenal speaker. Amazing. Told me stuff that I never even thought was real. Like exactly what's going on.
Like what? Like flat Earth? No, I'm kidding.
We started off like that and half the room left. No. He talked about school security. One of his popular books is called On Killing, and he was talking about the trends of school violence, school shootings, and what's going to continue. So ever since that point, I started really studying and keeping an eye on and watching school security and shootings and what goes on but it wasn't until my last maybe 3-4 years with the police department I started taking schools through the Department of Homeland Security up and down the East Coast, from Florida up to New Hampshire and everywhere in between. And I became certified. They call it a master certification of risk assessment, and it talks about it's all critical infrastructure, site security, et cetera. And it's co-sponsored with FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security and Texas A&M.
The school.
Yeah, it's a 3-part. It's a conglomerate of those 3 entities that were able to put on this type of training to train law enforcement or EMA, emergency management personnel, et cetera. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
All right, that's good to know. Thanks. Yeah. We're done.
Okay. What a week. Well, it's funny because you and I have known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say probably 5, 6, maybe 7 years. Somewhere in there.
At least, yeah.
And I didn't know all of that about you. Like I knew you did training, obviously, being previous owner of Roll Call. That's kind of how we met. Was a buddy of mine told me about this really nice gun store, and I'm like, I'll go down there and check it out.
Mutual friend.
Yeah. And then we just became closer through all of that. Did I ever tell you about the time that me and Uncle Chris went to a training at Roll Call?
No.
Okay. It was one of the best days of my life. So my brother-in-law.
What if I said yeah? Would you not tell the story?
I'll tell it anyways. My brother-in-law. He's kind of awesome guy, but kind of quirky.
Yeah.
And he's Mr. like by the book.
I'll be honest, I forgot that you even took that training until this
Do you
very
remember?
moment. Yes, now I'm thinking
all right,
back.
so what happened?
The moment I knew that I loved him to death as a human being. So my brother-in-law, he's a great guy, but he's very like by the book, methodical, like well thought out. I don't think he owns a TV. Like I think he only has the internet for like researching ballistics.
If I didn't know any better, he'd be Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah. So we go take this course, and it was awesome. It was all about home defense and what the laws were. And then you went through like probably an hour of learning the law, and not what to do, but learning what the law says. And you had to interpret it for your own self. And then we go through a practical at roll call. They have an indoor house setup, basically.
Indoor training house.
With a catwalk over the top so you can see what's going on in all the rooms. My brother-in-law goes first. And basically, you're put into a scenario that's like a real-world scenario.
Yeah.
And something happens, whether somebody breaks in or whatever the case may be. He goes, I'm sitting in the room waiting. I don't hear anything. I'm waiting. And then, boom, Joe pokes his head. He's like, Mike, are you ready to go? And I'm like, yeah. So I walk to the door and I'm like, hey, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, but like, how did he do? And he just looks back at me and goes,
the funeral's in a week.
Yeah. I asked Chris what happened later. He goes, I froze. He just walked up to me and took the gun out of my hand. I was like, you did what?
So give me an example of what that training would be that you guys offered there. Like, what did they go through? What was the purpose of that?
Well, yeah. So after my police career, I joined the family business full time, and it was roll call. So what we did is we opened up a training center. It's a police supply firearms store, indoor shooting range. But for all my training that I had with SWAT, there was nowhere to actually for our local law enforcement to go and train. So we developed this shoot house, non-lot. It's it'll be blanks or something like that.
Yeah, it's non-lethal.
That's right. And for that particular class that Mike is speaking of, that there was civilian home defense. It was called. And so something I always say, you don't rise to the occasion, even though heroes are made every day, you don't rise to the occasion, you drop to your lowest level of training. So we always say in the law enforcement world, the body will not go where the mind has not been. So what we do is we actually put you there where it really gets real quick, where we had people, discover a lot about themselves during that scenario because your mind is playing tricks on you, and all of a sudden it actually becomes real. So definitely makes you better equipped to respond to a home invasion, which that's what this course was mainly designed to take care of. Make sure you don't shoot your teenage kid that snuck out of the house, that's sneaking in early, 4 in the morning.
Christ,
there's all types of scenarios. So you don't just, okay, I'm armed, so I'm just going to shoot anybody that walks through the front door. Well,
nope.
Bad idea. Okay. Cause you don't know who that person is, so it's very important for us that responsible gun ownership is key. But the training was just a lot of fun. So it would just be a different scenario. So now let's say the next scenario, I'd be the bad guy and I'd literally break into the back door. You might hear a noise. The scenario's on. Just do what you do. You're not guided. You're not told what to do at this point. We do a debrief afterwards, and then we reacted again and, show you the good points, the bad points, something that you could have done differently. But when the scenario goes live, it's live. So you just respond like you would respond. There's no guidance at that point. So you might come down the hall and you're seeing some guy with a mask on. I might be wearing a mask, and I might just turn around and walk out the front door. Now, what do you do? And a lot of people, it just makes you think, well, how about the threat's gone, the family's safe. Let's call 911 right now.
Yeah.
Okay. I had people chase me out the door.
Right.
I had people say, I don't know what to do. Well, where's your kids? So we would set the scenario beforehand. Okay. You have 2 kids. All right. Here's your kid's bedroom. They're home sleeping. Your wife's out, having a few drinks with the girls. This is the scenario.
So to me, the faulty thing about when you give scenarios is they're prepared for it. Do you know what I mean?
No. So
what I'm saying is like when you say, here's the scenario that we're going to go into. Right.
No, so what he's saying is, the scenario, when I did it, the scenario was, he asked me, he's like, does your wife ever go out with her girlfriends?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, sometimes she'll go out with her girlfriends, like not as often as you and I go out, because, love is love. And, but she'll go out with her girlfriends, have a few drinks, come home, and maybe I'm already. What?
It was funny. Love is love.
I've been crushing it lately. I'm in a good place.
Yeah, you really are.
So he's like, so here's the scenario. Both of your kids are in bed. It's 12:30, midnight, whatever. And at that time, the kids were younger, so they were going to bed around, like 10, whatever. He goes, you're in bed, but you're not really asleep. Go. And that was the scenario.
So the point I was trying to get to. Did any of you guys see Sully?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember at the end of the movie where they're like, we had 17 pilots who all did this, and they couldn't do it, and blah blah blah, and then I don't know what like the thing was that was like the aha moment of that movie. I totally forget.
Well, so
but what
they
it
were
basically
saying-
is like, you have to prepare for the situation you aren't prepared for, and if
Yes.
if you know what you're going into, you're at an advantage in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So if you're like, hey, the kids are coming home, or the kids are in bed, the wife's out, having a mimosa. I don't know if that's at nighttime or the daytime, whatever. But you're prepared for that when you come in. 99 of 100 times, when somebody goes, when this happens to someone, that's the scenario they're not prepared for. So, I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Where
but
it's
what-
like, it's nice to be like, oh, that's turn 3, that's turn 4. But the
Right.
problem is when you're in the real world, you don't know where the turns are going to be.
So like
Does that make sense how I explain that? Or am I an idiot?
No, you're not.
You're on the right
No,
page,
no.
but like what I'll be honest, like I left that class, and as somebody who knows firearms pretty well, has trained quite a bit, I left that class 4, maybe 5 years ago, and I ramped up every bit of training that I do because I realized how woefully underprepared I was.
Okay, so maybe that's my question. Is that okay? So when you were doing those trainings with law enforcement, I think you did law enforcement, military too. Did you ever have military in there, or was it mostly like local police,
military,
state?
law enforcement? They'll use it a lot of times. They'll just
Right.
use it, and they'll have their own, let's say, training sergeant come with them and conduct the trainings for our company.
Okay.
We specifically hosted the civilian law enforcement.
So, as an instructor, how often were you like, oh, they're not willfully, but they're like, a lot of these guys are unprepared, or are they where they should be with their training and their reaction and how they respond to that?
Most are underprepared, not trained, just because they just never had a chance to. So this is the same thing. What you're talking about. So when we go and we do training with law enforcement, we know we're there to take on a bad guy. We know we're going to get shot at. Okay, but it's just our movements correct.
Right.
Did we miss a blind spot when we went into a room and we didn't check behind the dresser? There's a lot of things that factor in. It's not just like a game of like paintball. We're all just going to go and shoot each other up. It's all scenario based, and you have to think through the process. So we even went as far as just to say, okay, I'm calling 911, and I would be the pretend dispatcher. 911, what's your emergency? I have somebody in my house. Okay, what's your address? And they would actually forget their address.
Holy shit, really?
Oh, and they absolutely know it's training. So the more and more and more you do that, like law enforcement would normally do, and especially special weapons and tactics officer SWAT guys, they do a lot of training. So for them, it's just another day at the office. So to think on your toes is a lot easier with the more training you do. So for civilians that never get a chance to run this type of scenario training, it's overwhelming for them. And even though they realize that it's a training and no one's really going to get hurt.
Well, because a lot of people sit around and they talk shit. They're like, I would do this and I would do that, and I know exactly what to do. And then like when you're like put in the moment, it's like all those. Most of the time, in my experience, most of the people are very confident about their capabilities. No offense to Uncle Chris, but he's like, he just took my gun.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where it's like you can sit around a campfire and you can say all the things that you know, and then when you actually are when you meet that situation in real life, you really don't know how you're going to react.
You don't. You don't. Even with scenarios being and most law enforcement could vouch for this. They did not live every different type of scenario possible. So every scenario is going to be a little bit different, and you learn a lot about yourself, and you get practice and you get better and better and better. But that's a lot of times, excuse me, that's on the job training where how am I really going to react if this guy is standing in front of me with a knife and I can't retreat at this point because there's innocents behind me? How am I really going to react? And we learned that some officers react surprisingly, where they've turned around and ran. They're human. There's other officers that, that you would think is a pushover and handled it like an absolute champ and, disarm the guy. So I guess at the end of the day, we're all human. The more time you spend in scenario-based training, the better prepared and equipped you're going to be to actually handle a situation. Like I said right at the beginning, the body will not go where the mind has not been.
Yeah, it's a good quote, man. That's a great
practice or it's real life, either or, because really your subconscious does not really know if this is real or not. So you're just getting yourself in the mindset. It's a huge thing. Mindset is and this is another thing, just talking about law enforcement a little bit. We talk about training, but I really think that there's a lack of training in the mindset area.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Well, I'm not an expert on it by no means.
Yeah, but you have anecdotal evidence. You have experiential evidence.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, of course that I do. But I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist or nothing.
You know what? I'm really you know what I'm really pissed off about lately is we have to like preface all of our opinions with, I'm not a doctor, but chicken soup kind of helps. You don't trust me, man. I think you're the guy that if I'm going to have this conversation with, I'm not going to be like, well, what's your credentials on that? Like, what study have you looked
at? Now, the book, I have credentials on that. So.
Yeah, well, I want to get to that. But when you talk about like mindset, right?
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say that?
Being mentally prepared for what could happen. Okay, a lot of accidental, negligent shootings, negligent discharges comes from fear. Just because you're absolutely afraid. I know, this whole era is passing a little bit where all the cops are the bad guys and all that BS.
Oh, they're not all bastards?
No, actually.
That's not true?
No, not all.
Okay.
Despite popular belief, I guess, with the media now. No.
I tried to get the hashtag trust most women going, but they didn't want to.
Trust most women.
Yeah, because some of them lie. I was trying to do that, but.
Well, we just got flagged. There it was. We found the one.
I'm sorry.
We found it.
I'm sorry some of you lie.
No, honestly, for me, like the comparison that I like, as I'm listening to you talk, to me it sounds no different than sports.
Yeah,
it's no different than going to practice and let's say football, for example. Okay, the offense is working on whatever, the defense knows what's coming at them, but they still have to react.
That's right.
Like you practice the same play over and over and over. You look at receivers. I saw a video once of J.J. Watt, tight end, I think for the Texans. Literally catch from a machine, just catch 1,000 times, just over and over the same exact thing, just over his left shoulder.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what he did.
Well, I mean, that's the whole, how do you get to Carnegie Hall practice?
Yeah. It's repetition, because the more that you practice each type of thing that you are doing.
So that's physical repetition.
But that muscle memory that ends up becoming muscle.
But then it frees up your mind to think about other things.
That's right. So that's physical repetition.
Yeah.
That would be equivalent to an officer on the shooting range just drawing the weapon. So when the bad guy pulls his weapon, the cop has his gun out within a split second.
But if you're working on all of those things, you can train the mentality, but if you really train the physical, then I don't have to think about, say as a civilian, pull up your shirt here, make sure you don't put your finger on the trigger. Is there a safety? Keep it here. You're coming up, you're out. You don't have to think through all the steps. Instead, you're just thinking of, I'm keeping an eye on his hands. That's all I'm worried about.
Right.
In the home invasion scenario stuff that we did, it wasn't really a class on tactics of how to clear a home. It wasn't, there was a little bit of that in there, but it wasn't, you turn to this wall, you look at this degree of an angle, you check here. It was, in the first scenario that I did, there's a guy in the front living room. My kids are behind me in their rooms. He starts walking towards me, acting kind of irate. I think had a pipe in his hand. And as he got closer, I realized he's drunk. And if he swings at me with the pipe, I'm justified to shoot him. I know that. So it was more so like the mentality of what are the laws? What are you allowed to do, not to do? And how should you respond based on the fact that, I think you were in one of the scenarios, you and I are about the same size, which means I wouldn't really be legally justified to shoot you if there wasn't, if it was somebody significantly smaller or a woman. I can't shoot her because in front of a judge, it would be, unless you had a weapon. But it's like
I think we assumed that she had a weapon.
yeah,
I don't know.
but like, and so it was kind of like
bitch.
it was like that. It was that mentality of like, what can you
In
do?
your
what can you not do?
scenario, it was an ex-girlfriend showing up.
Yeah.
she wanted her DVDs back there.
Yes.
Do they still
Yeah.
exist?
I want my Jane Fondas back.
Yes.
That's
So
what I
it was
want.
like, it was training on that mentality. And honestly, I think the way that you do that is just to train. Like, I mean, you just train over and over.
So, okay. I think I'm still trying to narrow this point down, right? I think the physical thing is very important. I think the mental thing, that's a harder one to teach. That's a harder one to really prepare people for the scenario where it is life and death, or it is a serious threat, and like a home invasion, for instance. You could rehearse that as many times as you want, but unless your family is in absolute legit jeopardy, it changes the way you're going to think.
Oh, yeah.
I could give you a quick scenario. I mean, for a long time, I usually, I didn't bring up this, but you guys were so grateful graceful to have me on your show.
Are you going to come out and say you love me?
No. That's
a different year.
That's a different. that was so 4 years ago. I'm over it. That was a phase.
Yeah, it's a college thing. It was a college
It was a
thing.
phase.
Yeah.
Everybody was. I was just trying to fit in. So I used to be what they call a marksman on our team, also known as a sniper, but
right.
That has negative connotations in court to say, yeah, you're a sniper, you're a marksman. Okay, so the very first time and deer hunters, you can relate to this. The very first time I actually had a human being in my scope was truly. I learned a lot about myself, and I've already been an officer for 6-7 years, and I really thought I was that guy. And I said, yeah, no matter what, I could take on the world. I would do this in a situation. Yeah. You shoot the gun out of his hand, all that BS, right? But it wasn't until that very moment that I finally realized that I could do it if I had to.
Because that was always a question. Like,
it wasn't a question until it became reality.
Right.
Then it became a question because my heart went 100 miles an hour. I started getting some tunnel vision. The bad guy actually had a gun, and he had already shot at police, and it was a hostage type situation. And finally, I had to remember about my training. I had to remember to think, breathe. In through my nose, out through my mouth, and calm myself down, take a few breaths, and everything just kind of cleared up for me, and I got steady, and I was able to put the crosshairs where they needed. Now, luckily, thank the Lord, I did not have to pull that trigger, but it wasn't until that point when I realized that I could do it if I had to, but you really don't know until you're really put into that situation. So back to Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, he talks about the difference between a clear shot and a cloudy shot. So in a sniper type situation, that's considered a clear shot, where you basically watch the person take their last breath, and then you decide now you're gonna, because you're safe. Okay. Right. But somebody around you or around him or her is not safe. So you make that final decision. A cloudy shot where I just draw a gun on you. You just react, just like catching the football. You just react. You pull that gun and you press that trigger. So that's cloudy shot. It just happens so fast. Many officers, you'd ask them after a shooting, how many rounds did you fire? And they'd say, I don't know, 2. And then you find out they shot 12.
Right.
And they just don't, it's sensory overload. Back to the mindset. It's very hard to get a lot of good practice with that, but so many, I believe that's where our law enforcement community, and our political leaders are lacking in funding our law enforcement with their mental training. And that particular case was on the job training. Now, if I needed to actually pull that trigger and I wasn't able to, well,
that's a big problem.
It's too late now. I mean, I just dropped the ball. I mean, I'm only human, but that's on the job type training.
Well, as you were telling me that, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, we look at all these people who defend us as like, oh, they got it. And then you realize, man, they're just humans like you and I.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of people, I think it gets lost on people that law enforcement, do have fears, hopes, dreams, wants, desires, joys. And we're just like, oh no, they're just, the consensus is you're all dicks. Which I don't agree with.
Two
at
things
all.
can be true at the same time.
Do you find that frustrating?
No,
because you know a lot of these. I mean, you're in it. You know.
No, I don't.
Or you just zone it. You just tune it out.
For me, I know I do my job right. I know, or I did my job right. I know my partners do their job right. And if I was ever sitting next to somebody that was going to frame somebody, or they're doing drugs in their cars, that doesn't happen, or at least around me, because it would be shut off really quick. So this whole notion that we have this big secret society in law enforcement, and we all stick together, and we're gonna frame guys, and I mean that's really cool for the movies, and I like those movies too, but it's just not reality.
So let's move it. I want to talk about the book, and then we're gonna go into the other portion that I told you about, where it's like we go off on the subscriptions.
Yeah.
All right. So the
book,
book,
really wild, right?
we basically just talk about our feelings. So so the book is School Security: The Risk Assessment Blueprint, Your Tool to a Safer School. What I mean, after everything that you've done, why write a book?
Well,
isn't that exhausting?
It is. I tell my friends I officially wrote more books than I read. So, so I have no idea why I did this. No, I do. That's a lie.
But you saw something. You saw something that wasn't working.
I did. So I'm not a writer by nature. Okay. This is the first book I never even thought of trying to write a book. However, I think what really prepared me to write this book is the fact that I used to write hundreds and hundreds of reports, and you just really got good at writing and articulating your story. And that's what a book was. Nothing more.
How long did it take you?
Off and on, about 2.5 years, 3 years, something like that.
That's not bad.
Yeah. It was off and on. And then a lot of times I would put it down, and then I'd pick it up. So I think if I wrote a book again, I'd like to write a, fiction or something, it's just something
more exciting, where it's like, it's not a report.
Well, everything has to be, you have to be able to back everything that you write. When you write a book like this, you have to be able to back everything. You put on paper. You have to be able to back it up.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be a critic and say, well, you don't do it this way, you don't do it that way. I think what you'll learn by the book or from the book is that there is no wrong way. Okay. It really comes down to learning what the heck this is, school security is even about. It's just develops. Please let me know if I'm getting ahead of myself.
Well, here, let's lead it. Let's take us on a journey. What did you see? Well, in other words, look, anybody who does anything in their life that's out of the norm, something sparked that fire.
Yeah, is there a singular event
what sparked the fire in you where you're like, something's got to be done about this, or an education needs to be
well, I knew I had an answer that a lot of people did not have, and I'm not the only one that has this answer.
Yeah,
most of your law enforcement, not just law enforcement, but law enforcement professionals that specifically study site security, critical infrastructure, risk assessment, those guys, they have the answer, but nobody else does. So you can't go to a school and say, well, hey, I want to learn all about school security and risk assessments and all that stuff. And and I realized there was no book on it. So when I got into this.
Wait, since Columbine, there's no book on this.
No book that I found that would help me and totally simplify it.
That's my point. Like if there was a book out there, I think it would be blasted from the rooftops. It's like, this is what you got to do. And I haven't heard that in 20 years. Have you?
I mean, there's a lot of books about safety, occupational, corporate struggle. There's a lot of books but never one that I know of that put it all together specifically for schools.
Yeah. Right.
And that's it's crazy because, you literally wrote the book on this. Or
at least one of the well-known ones.
Yeah. And but it's crazy to me too. Kind of like you bringing up Columbine. It's been 25 years.
Columbine was 99.
99. Yeah.
So it's it's been that long, and it's still happening. How have we not figured this out yet?
Is that your fire? Was that the fire that sparked you up?
Well, after leaving Scranton to join the family business, roll call full time, We ended up selling after about 3 years after our move. We had roll call for, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years. But then after our big move, we had it for about 3 more years. And it was a good sale. I mean, it's doing awesome today. Everything was really good. And my father was able to, finally retire and take it easy. And but after I sold that, I kind of looked around and I said, what now? And law enforcement, it's in your blood. And it's a very, very hard thing to let go. And when you're seeing the school violence and the shootings, I felt like, I have the answer. What do I do with it now? The city, the city of the Scranton residents paid a lot of money for me to get all this training. Mm-hmm. I left them after, 3-4 years of specific training. What am I going to do now? If you have the answer to something that could actually, and it's funny because I told my wife, spent a lot of time with this, and I said, I don't care about the money if it saves one life. I mean, obviously right. I can't care about the money. I think I make like $1.50 on Amazon when
that's
they sell.
How they get you.
Yeah. There's really no money unless you're writing a Harry Potter book.
Yeah.
But now, if you want to know what I know, and if you want to do your own site security and your own risk assessment or whatever, you could read that. Now we could all sit down at the table. Now we all have the same base foundation. Now it's like the how-to, and we'll get into the intricate details about your particular school. But now we all have the same base knowledge going into that school. I've spoken with a lot of school administrators. And I even use some examples in there, which are kind of funny, but it's really true, like how little they know. And it's not just them. It's everybody. There's just no information. For example, first thing I always hear is, hey, I heard you do, school security and, you're into that. Yeah. Yep. Could you do an active shooter drill? Active shooter drills are very, very important. You're familiar with them, right? Everybody heard of them. They're extremely important. They're a good thing. So they are a good thing, but that's just one of the 5 steps of any good emergency operation plan. So it's prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. Everybody wants to learn about the response. What do I do let's skip all this stuff. Tell me what to do when the guy shows up. That's what I want to know. That is so, boy, I mean,
it's almost like eat what you want. I'll take a pill later.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. But what about the prevention? What about the protection? What about mitigation? I know you want to do the response. How do we respond? And then the recovery. But what's, when we're talking about response, what's the correct, response? There's always, there's a lot of different companies out there that they will host the run, hide, fight, and all that stuff is all good. Mm-hmm. So you could pick whatever one you want as far as your response technique. But that's only one part of, you don't even know where the bad guy gets in. You don't even know where your vulnerable points are. You don't even know how's your policies and procedures. Does your teachers actually have training? What kind of training? So when I would do a risk assessment at a school, I would wear nothing that identifies me at all as a police officer. I mean, I'll wear a polo shirt or something, but I'll walk on the outside of the school and change a class. I'll knock on the door from the outside, see if a kid lets me in. Like,
how often does that happen?
Well, some schools, I had kids let me in, and I had other schools where the kids go, oh, their face drops and they take off. But then again, they never reported it. I never had that would be the ultimate.
This seems so insane to me, where it's like you're we realize that these things happen, right? And it's kind of baffling to me that as far as like administration or the elected officials, they're more worried about the active shooter thing instead of wondering about well, how do we get here? What are the things that we do to prevent this from happening, and not just prevent it when somebody's in the school, as opposed to how do we cut this off at the pass before? Right. It seems like they're only focused on I don't know. There's a terrible word to describe this, where it's the most emotional part.
Feel
of
good.
It.
That's
yeah. Well, this reminds me of the conversation we had with Sam Fettis. We were talking about firearms. Obviously, if Sam Fettis is guy,
he was a CIA guy,
ex-CIA.
Yeah, he's awesome. I'll send it to you.
Great guy,
Very cool.
Great guy. And so I was doing this Ask a Spy segment. It was all this did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone? All these things asking the CIA guy. And I asked him, what's the best spy gun? And he goes, well, it depends on your purpose, blah, blah, blah. But he said, as a CIA agent, if I have to use my firearm, he goes, I've messed up 12 times today already.
Perfect.
And it's like, that's, kind of like what you're saying.
That makes sense.
It's like, if we have to get to a situation of, are we going in teams of 2, or are we doing this, or how, boom, boom, boom. Well, how did he get into the building first? That's the number one question, is how did this person get into the building?
Yeah. Did we miss any signs?
Yeah.
And now take it a little step further. An elementary school versus a high school. Elementary school, the chances are your threat is going to be from the outside. When a high school, your threat is probably going to be from the inside. So, so that's when
What do you mean, like a student?
Yeah, sure.
At the high school level?
Sure. So if I was doing a risk assessment on a hair salon,
yeah,
what would be the biggest threat? What would my obvious threat?
Humidity. It just makes the hair so frizzy.
I was going to say an ex-boyfriend, but yeah, humidity.
That has happened. That has actually happened.
Well, well, it's the same thing with a high school. You got to look at, okay, what's my most obvious threat? Okay, it's not going to be Al Qaeda coming over to the high school.
Right.
Elementary school, maybe, but not the high school. So the early warning signs are going to be really important, really crucial. And one other point before I forget, I hear this a lot too when they go, well, it's a school, it's not a prison. And so it's a school, it's not a prison. Well, and one of my friends on social media wrote this to me, and it was absolutely genius, and he's spot on. Prison protects the outside population from the people on the inside. So we're not making a prison out of a school, neither. We're making a fortress.
Yeah.
We're protecting the
What's
people
inside.
on the inside from the exterior. So it's just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, because, kind of looking at what's happened, you go back to Uvalde, Texas, and an elementary school, that threat came from the outside. To bring it really locally and really personal.
I wanted to talk about that later.
You want to talk about that on the back end?
Yeah, on the back end.
Okay.
Yeah.
But looking at what happened around here, it was a threat from the inside, essentially. And that is what has caused for us locally this uptick in security and all of these things. And I think we're going to talk about that on the back end.
Yeah, we're gonna do a couple more minutes here, and then we're gonna jump.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Roger that.
I'm just letting everybody know what's happening. 'Cause so what? Okay, so what do you? How underprepared or how not prepared are most schools and/or school districts for this threat?
Well,
Generally.
up here in the Northeast, yeah. I mean, Jesus, probably every
Not at
single
all.
one of them.
They're at risk.
Oh yeah. Well, and there is going to be risk. So when I talk about
higher risk.
yeah. Well, when you're not prepared, you're always going to be at even higher risk. Okay, that's why we talk about mitigation. Mitigation's part of the 5 steps in an emergency operation plan. So when I sit and I'm talking to a bunch of school board members, I'd say, listen, I'm not here saying, hey, you follow my guide and not a single kid will die. If anybody tells you that, they're either lying to you or absolutely ignorant on the topic.
Right.
However, I don't want one kid, hurt, period. But 1 verse 20. So I'm not here to, and I said this to many school directors, I'm not here to make you feel good. If somebody wants and the bad guy comes, there's going to be bloodshed and people are going to die. How do I prevent it? How do I mitigate? 1 verse 20, 5 verse 25. That's the key. And that's speaking truth. And without any of the political correctness, I don't get into the politics whatsoever. I don't have the luxury of politics and saying,
Are there politics when it comes to this?
Oh God. Yeah, well, absolutely. If you say guns in school, that's it. They don't want to hear no more. You're right wing.
I haven't heard a better way yet. I'm just saying.
Well, this is the thing. As soon as you mention, guns in school, or he on roll call, he's pro gun. That has nothing to do with nothing. So here's the only difference then from me versus anybody else that says, that wants to bring in the political argument. The difference is when I would go home at night after doing a risk assessment and reporting back to the school district exactly what I see and what has to be done, what kept me up at night is what if I missed that one point, that one part that kept me up at night. And then I'd, God forbid that school gets attacked, and an attack was made on something or somehow, some way that I did not see coming. Now I got to live with that. And to me, that's personal. And what literally what I would do at a school, I would spend days and sometimes weeks trying and learning different ways to commit mass murder. And that was my job.
Okay. Terrifying.
Yeah.
Number two,
because if you're not doing it, somebody else is.
Right.
So
right.
I want to look at the coin a different way. So the things that kept you up at night were the things was the one thing that you could have missed. Why don't the people who make decisions, the things they neglect, keep them up at night? Why doesn't that, like, in other words, so you write these assessment reports, right? So I'm sure, I don't know how many steps there are. Here's all my findings. Here's like the 12 things I think you should do, right? And I'm sure then it's up to them to say, which ones are we going to implement? Why doesn't it keep them up at night when they don't implement all of them? In other words, like the one thing that you might have missed is going to keep you up at night, but these people in charge, they're like, well, do we have to do all of them? Am I correct in my assessment of that?
It's great that you said that. One of, during my initial meetings with a school district, school board, before I'm going to do their assessment, I would let them know it's kind of like, are you ready to learn? Because there is, and I always make sure that they would have their solicitor present. Are you ready to learn what is wrong with your school? And I would bring that point up from a legal standpoint. You are going to get a full report of what is, the vulnerable areas. And if you don't do anything to help combat this, I mean, lawsuits are going to fly. So I don't pull no punches.
Do you think that's maybe why some schools aren't doing things like this?
Yes. They don't want to know. It's easier not to know because you're going to have a guy like me. And a lot of times people think a guy like me is going to come in and say, yeah, just increase your budget by $5, $6, $7 million. We'll make this thing really secure. And they're going, okay, they don't have that kind of money. What I try to do is all my planning is usually comes with very, very little cost. Let's face it, our school district has always been really strapped for money. I did a lot of schools for the Scranton School District, and I looked at ways to make it safe without, and understanding that we don't have an unlimited checkbook and just say, hey, where's the guard dogs? How about the sniper towers?
And also we don't have to get rid of arts and crafts to protect our kids too. Right.
Right.
Got to have those macaroni necklaces.
Man, that's a tad disheartening.
It's true.
Well, it's kind of like, what is it? The insurance companies, they'll do a recall sometimes. We were talking about this in Fight Club.
Yeah, it's the Fight Club thing.
They'll do a recall if the assessment is not recalling this, and the lawsuits we're going to get from the deaths on not doing this roll call will outweigh the financial repercussions. So, if it's cheaper to to
pay out the lawsuits
than it is to bring back all of these Jeep Grand Cherokees that have bad brakes, then we'll just pay the lawsuits.
Well, that was like the Pinto. That was like the big thing. It was the brakes or something that when they got an accident in the back, it would ignite the gas tank and the car would explode.
What?
And it was cheaper for them to just let it go,
blow
than
up,
to have the cars come back and fix like a $5 part.
Yeah. And it's a really sad reality because, we're talking about kids.
Yeah.
And I think even, man, like it's a harsh reality, but the reality is some people do let politics and games and finances play into kids' safety.
And along with that, I know we're getting close on time, but along with your point, one of the other major issues why people or school districts or our elected officials don't want to address this, or parents, I'll be honest, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good because I got to actually sit there and say and paint the picture of a mass shooting, and people don't want to even think of that. They could deal with fires, fire alarms. We could put all the fire apparatus, everything. But when it comes to a human killing another human, we don't really want to touch that issue because it really makes us feel uncomfortable to talk about dead children. But it's reality. So I see a lot of resistance just from that alone, where it's not a topic of conversation, but we'll make sure that the fire drills and all that's happening, because it's not as spooky and as dark and evil. A fire, could be a natural disaster type thing. We could deal with that.
Are we not fucking talking about these things because it gives some people anxiety?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is mentally handicapped just to think about things that way.
I believe, but I also do believe on the flip side of the coin, I believe there's a lot of people that really are looking for this information and saying, what do we do? I want to make the school safer. But that's going to be up to the elected officials.
But we have 82 bathrooms, one for each gender.
All right. So here's what we're going to do.
Well, we just got flagged.
We're going to... There is 81. I looked up the pronouns.
It's 81. Sorry.
Really?
By the end of today, it'll be 82.
So the book is School Security, the Risk Assessment Blueprint by Joe Harris, Joseph J. Harris. What's the J? James?
John?
Yes. Like the Baptist.
Yes.
Like the Baptist.
I don't know. I couldn't think of anything else. Lennon? I don't know. How can people get this?
That's available on Amazon right now.
Yeah, and if you pay
Barnes
it,
and Nobles too, I think.
If you pay for it, Joe gets $1.
About
$1.
Give or take.
So we're gonna hop over to the subscription side where we can actually talk about feelings, because I'm pissed about that. Dan, Joe, thanks so much for being here, and then Dan,
What a week.
Politics shouldn't play into this at all.
I like to think maybe it was, and I'm not saying that the guy that they hired is. I heard. Good things
I know
about
you're
him.
not saying that.
Yeah, I heard good things about him,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure.
But he didn't write the book.
Well, I hope for his sake and the students. I hope he does really well and succeeds. And
I do too,
but
because he's gonna go read your book.
We should find out where his office is and just keep giving him books.
He's going to photocopy it, actually.
No, we're just going to keep delivering Joe's books to him. Wait, get the camera on me. Look, if you subscribe, your subscription money will go towards buying books that we can then put in the mail to send to whomever is in charge of security for the Scranton School District.